My name is Delia Marsh, and I'm 34 years old. 11 days after I landed back on American soil, I sat across a mahogany desk from a title officer and slid a single photograph toward her. It was a picture of my own signature, the real one, next to the forgery my parents had used to sell my beach house while I was 7,000 miles away in a place with no cell service and no way to stop them. I had waited 3 weeks to take that photograph. I had paid for it too, in ways I'll explain. The title officer went very quiet. Then she asked me the one question I'd been praying someone with authority would finally ask. I thought that meeting would be the hardest part of my week. I was wrong, because 3 days after my parents sold the house they thought was theirs to sell, my mother stood pounding on my apartment door, screaming loud enough for the whole building to hear. And when the screaming didn't work, she lowered her voice and offered me something far more dangerous than her anger. But here's what none of them knew. I had already found the notary. Welcome back to Revenge Camera Stories, where the truth gets caught on film and quiet people stop staying quiet. We tell stories about ordinary folks who were pushed 1 inch too far and decided to document everything. If stories about standing your ground and keeping the receipts speak to you, drop a comment below and hit subscribe, because this one goes places you will not expect. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without my grandmother. Nana Ruth bought that beach house in Cape Marlin in 1974 with money she earned, cleaning other people's homes and selling hand-sewn quilts at the Saturday market. It wasn't fancy. 2 bedrooms, a warped front porch, and a screen door that slapped shut like applause every time the wind came off the water. But it was hers. Free and clear. She used to tell me the ocean doesn't care how much money you have. And neither did she. I grew up spending every summer in that house. My parents would drop me off in June and collect me in August. Relieved, I understand now. To have me somewhere else. My brother Corey was the golden one, the planned one. I was the surprise that arrived when my mother thought she was done. And she never quite forgave me for it. But Nana Ruth did something none of them expected. When she passed in 2019, she left the beach house to me. Not to my parents. Not to Corey. To me. Because as her will put it in her own shaky handwriting, Delia is the only one who ever loved the house and not the price of it. My parents smiled at the funeral. Then they stopped smiling the moment the lawyer read that line out loud. I want to be clear about something. I never rubbed it in. I offered to let them use the house whenever they wanted. I paid the property taxes myself out of my nursing salary, every single year, because that felt like the right way to honor Nana. I even kept her quilts folded in the cedar chest exactly where she left them. Here's the thing about being the overlooked child, though. When something good finally comes to you, the people who ignored you don't see a gift. They see a mistake that needs correcting. The first sign was small. I want you to remember that word, small. It was early 2023, and my mother started asking questions that felt like conversation but landed like surveying stakes. How much did I think the house was worth now that Cape Marlin had gotten so popular? Had I ever thought about selling? Wouldn't the money be more useful than a drafty old cottage I only visited twice a year? I told her the truth. I said the house wasn't for sale, not now, not ever, because it was the one thing in my life that was purely mine and purely Nana's. My mother smiled the way she smiles when she's already decided. You're wrong. Practical girl, she said. You always think you know best. I laughed because it sounded almost like a compliment. It took me another year to understand it was a warning. Now here's the part where my career becomes the point. I'm a trauma nurse, and in the spring of 2024, I signed up for a 9-month humanitarian rotation in a remote region overseas, the kind of place where the nearest working cell tower is a 2-day drive and the mail runs on a truck that comes when it comes. I told my family. I told them I'd be nearly impossible to reach. I told them the exact dates. I handed them the calendar to my absence, and they took it. Before I left, my father asked if he could hold on to a copy of my important documents, just in case something happens. To you out there, sweetheart. He said it with such tenderness that I actually teared up. My father, who had never once called me sweetheart in 33 years, suddenly worried about me. I gave him copies of my passport, my social security card, and, God help me, a folder of old paperwork that included the deed to the beach house and several documents bearing my signature. I still think about that folder, not with guilt exactly, but with the specific queasiness of a woman who watched herself hand over the knife and say, here, in case you get cold. I left in April 2024, and somewhere over the ocean, while I was fixated on the work ahead, A plan I'd been half noticing for a year quietly went operational. Let me tell you what happened while I was gone, because I reconstructed all of it later, day by day, and it still amazes me. In June, 2 months into my rotation, my parents contacted a real estate agent in Cape Marlin. They presented themselves as my representatives. They had my documents. They had my signature to copy. And they had something I didn't know existed yet. A family friend named Warren Teague, a notary public, who'd known my father for 30 years and owed him a favor from a business. Deal gone sideways in the 90s. Here is how it worked. My parents drafted a power of attorney, a fake one, that claimed I'd authorized them to sell the house on my behalf. They forged my signature on it, and Warren Teague notarized it, stamping his official seal onto a document I had never seen, swearing under his notary oath that I had appeared before him in person on a day when I was, in verifiable fact, on the other side of the planet. That single stamp is the whole story. Keep it in your mind. We're going to see it again. With the notarized power of attorney, the sale looked completely legitimate. The buyers were a lovely young couple named the Hollises, who fell in love with Nana's warped porch and had no idea the people selling it to them were committing a felony. The house sold in August 2024 for $890,000. $890,000. My parents deposited it into an account I had no access to and told absolutely no one who mattered. And then they waited for me to come home and, they assumed, be too shocked, too jet-lagged, and too intimidated to do anything about it. They studied me my whole life. They just never studied me carefully enough. I came home in January 2025. I'd been gone 9 months. I was thinner, quieter, and changed in ways that place changes everyone. The first thing I did after sleeping for 18 hours straight was drive. 3 hours to Cape Marlin to see the house I'd been dreaming about in a tent under foreign stars. I turned onto Sandpiper Lane and there was a new mailbox, new shutters, a child's bicycle on Nana's porch, and a family I'd never seen carrying groceries through my front door. I sat in my car for a long time. Then I did the least dramatic thing in the world. I didn't scream. I didn't knock. I took out my phone and I photographed the house. Wide shot. Close-up of the new mailbox with a name that wasn't mine. Timestamp on every frame. Because here's what 9 months in a crisis zone teaches you. When everything falls apart, you don't panic. You document. You verify. You survive first and feel later. I drove to the county recorder's office the next morning and pulled the deed. There it was in public record, sold. My name transferred away by a power of attorney. I had never signed, notarized by a man I'd met exactly twice at Christmas parties. I stood at that counter and I understood, fully and finally, that my own parents had committed a crime against me while patting my hand and calling me sweetheart. Now let me tell you what I did not do. I did not call them screaming. I'd been the overlooked daughter my whole life, and I'd watched how fast this family could turn my hurt into proof that I was too emotional, too dramatic, always making things about herself. This time, I would count every single brick before I said the word wall. I made myself a rule that January. Verify, don't assume. Document, don't accuse. The first thing I did was hire an attorney named Rosa Delgado. She's 51. She talks like a prosecutor. And the first substantive thing she did was take away my instinct to confront. From this moment, Rosa said, you say nothing to your parents, nothing. No angry calls, no showing up, no confrontation. Because the second you tip them off, they start covering tracks, moving money, and getting their stories straight. Right now, they think you're overwhelmed and beaten. That's the most powerful position you'll ever hold. Let them keep believing it. I actually argued with her. I had a photograph of a stranger's bicycle on my grandmother's porch. I was ready to burn the world down. She didn't budge. Delia listened to me like it's a court instruction. Forgery and fraud are serious felonies, but you only get one clean shot at proving them. If you swing early and miss, they'll claim you gave verbal permission, that it was a family arrangement, that you're just angry about the price. Every true thing you say becomes strategy, so we don't swing until we cannot miss. So here's the yardstick I offer anyone who's ever been told they're overreacting. Sometimes the most aggressive move on the board looks exactly like sitting still. What am I allowed to do? I asked. Rosa smiled for the first time. Everything quiet. Everything documented. We build the case brick by brick. And when it's finished, we don't knock on their door. We knock on the district attorney's. For 3 weeks, my apartment stopped being an apartment. I laid documents across every surface. I hired a forensic document examiner named Priyanka out of the city and paid her $4,000 from my own savings, money I'd earned in that 10 overseas. to compare the signature on the power of attorney against 40 samples of my genuine handwriting. Her report came back in 9 pages of technical language that said in expert terms what I already knew in my bones. The signature was a forgery. Not even a good one. Whoever traced it had gotten the pressure wrong, the slant wrong, and had lifted the pen in a place I never do. But a forged signature alone wasn't enough. I needed to prove I couldn't have been there. So I gathered my travel records, my visa stamps, my rotation log signed by my supervising physician, and a dated group photograph from the exact day the power of attorney claimed. I'd stood in front of a notary in Cape Marlin. On that day, I was documented 7,000 miles away, holding a clipboard in a medical tent. You cannot argue with a passport stamp. My mother had taught me my whole life that anything could be talked around. But I dare anyone to talk around a visa if you've ever had your own family look you in the eye and treat your reality like it's negotiable. Drop a comment and tell me about it. I read every single one, and then I found the notary log. Every notary in this state is required by law to keep a journal, a physical record of every document they notarize, including the signer's name, the date, and a signature from the person appearing before them. Warren Teague had one, and through a records request my attorney was fully entitled to make, we obtained the relevant page. There it was. My name, in Warren's handwriting, a signature that wasn't mine, in a column where I supposedly signed, and a date I was on another continent. That notary log was the empty shelf. It was the dust nobody thought to wipe, because Warren Teague, in his arrogance, had documented his own crime in a legally required book, sworn under oath, complete with his official seal. I photographed every page, wide shot, close-up, timestamps on every frame. I want to describe what I felt, and it wasn't triumph. Have you ever finally found the source of a leak in your house? Actually found it. The real crack in the real pipe? You're relieved and sick at the same time, because now you have to open the wall. My parents had built a straw straight into the one thing my grandmother left me and drunk down, $8,000 and $90,000, all while calling me sweetheart. I closed the file, squared its edges, and wrote one sentence on the cover in pencil. Nobody sees this until it's finished. Now in February, my mother made her move, and I'll admit it was almost clever. She called me. First time since I'd been back. Her voice was warm, careful. The voice she uses when she wants something. She said the family missed me. She said we should have dinner, clear the air, talk about some financial things while I was away. She was testing the water. She wanted to know how much I knew. I said, calm as a weather report, that I'd love to have dinner soon, that I was still catching up on jet lag. I gave her nothing, and I could hear the relief in her exhale, the sound of a woman who believes her overlooked daughter is still, after everything, easy to manage. I hung up and stared at my wall of documents. They thought they were running out my clock, waiting for me to settle back into being small. They had no idea I'd already synchronized my watch to theirs. Let me pause here, friend to friend. If you've ever warned someone you loved that a person couldn't be trusted and watched them believe the charming liar over you, tell me in the comments. And if you want to know exactly what I sacrificed to get justice, stay with me because it's coming. Subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. Here's the part where I have to be honest about the cost. Rosa sat me down in March and laid out the fork in the road. You have 2 paths, she said. Path 1 is civil. We sue your parents quietly. We probably recover some of the money. Nobody goes to jail. It stays a family matter, sealed and private. You get paid, and the world never knows. And path 2? I asked. Path 2, we take everything to the district attorney. We press for criminal charges. Forgery, fraud, and elder. No, you're not elderly. Grand theft. Your parents could face real jail time. Warren Teague loses his notary commission and possibly his freedom. But Delia, understand this. Path 2 is public. Your name gets attached to a case that says your own mother and father are felons. There is no sealing that. Your family, as you knew it, ends the day we file. And criminal cases don't guarantee you a dime of your money back. I sat with that for a long, careful evening, cold tea going colder in my hands. I knew the quiet version. Take the settlement, let my parents write a check to make it disappear, keep the family name clean, never have to explain at Thanksgiving why mom and dad aren't there. I had been building quiet versions my whole life. Quiet versions are what overlooked children make instead of scenes. We swallow the family's poison in private and call it maturity. And staring at that cold tea, I finally did the arithmetic. Every quiet version I'd ever accepted had taught my parents the same lesson, that Delia could be crossed, and Delia would forgive. My silence had never protected me. It had only ever protected them. If the truth stayed private, it would stay deniable. It had to cost something in daylight. And the person it had to cost first was me. Because here's what the settlement would have meant. And I want you to hear the actual numbers. Path 1, the civil suit, might have recovered $400,000. Maybe $500,000, with my name kept clean and my parents free. Path 2, the criminal case, might recover nothing, but it would put the truth on permanent public record and hold them accountable for what they actually did. I chose Path 2. I chose to walk away from possibly $500,000 in exchange for the truth being undeniable, because some things cost more than money, and a grandmother's house sold by forgery is one of them. Rosa looked at me one last time. You understand you might get no money at all? I understand, I said, and I signed the authorization. That was the door closing behind me for good. The settlement, the soft landing, the option of ever pretending none of this happened. Gone in blue ink by my own hand, we took everything to the district attorney's office in April 2025, the forensic report, the passport stamps, the visa records, the rotation logs, the dated photograph from 7,000 miles away, and the crown jewel, Warren Teague's own notary journal, in his own handwriting, documenting a crime he'd sworn under oath he didn't commit. The DA's office is not easily impressed, but I watched a senior investigator turn to that notary page, read the date, cross-reference my passport, and go very still. He wrote it down, the investigator said quietly. He actually wrote it down. Notaries always do? Rosa said. That's the whole point of them. Charges were filed in May. And that's when my mother finally understood. The game had changed. The knocking started at 7 in the evening. Hard, flat-handed, urgent. The family kind, not the police kind. My mother had never once visited my apartment. She'd have had to acknowledge I lived a life without her. But my address was on the court filing, and there she was through my peephole. No warmth left in her face at all. I opened the door, because you do not get a scene like this twice in your life. How could you? She came in without being asked, and her voice filled the apartment wall to wall. Your own parents. You want to send us to prison? Over a house? Over a drafty little cottage your grandmother should have left to the family. Not to one ungrateful girl who abandoned us to go play hero overseas? I stood by my bookshelf and let it break over me. 2 years earlier, that voice could have reorganized my whole nervous system. Now it was just weather against a window. And then, this is the part I'd have missed when I was younger, she read the room, recalibrated and changed instruments. The volume dropped. Her chin softened. She sat down on my sofa uninvited, and she became, in one seamless motion, warm. Delia, sweetheart. We're all upset. Let me make this right. And here it came. The offer in its evening gown. We'll give you the money. All of it, the full $890. We'll put it in your name today. Just call the district attorney and say it was a misunderstanding. A family arrangement that got confused. Nobody has to go to prison. You get your money, we keep our family, and no one ever has to know. You're so good at keeping the peace, sweetheart. It's the best thing about you. There it was. My whole nature, appraised and handed back to me as a compliment. By the one person who'd always known exactly how to use it. A year earlier, it would have worked. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I asked the question I'd been saving. Mom, who notarized the power of attorney? She went very still. Because I have the journal, I said. Warren's journal. In his handwriting. With the date I was overseas. You didn't just forge my signature. You made a man swear a lie under a government seal. That's not a misunderstanding. Mom, that's a felony with a paper trail. And the paper trail already belongs to the state. She stood up slowly, gathering her coat. And she delivered the line she'd surely composed in the car. If you do this, you have no family. You'll be alone. Is a house worth being alone? I thought about Nana Ruth, who cleaned other people's homes and sewed quilts by hand and left the one thing she loved to the one grandchild, who loved it back.